Despite being a disabled entertainer, despite being blind, getting on a stage just allows me to take ownership of what I'm able to do. Everyone can see me for what it is that I love to do, and no one's judging me on anything personal. Hello, I am Neon Calypso. I am a Boston queen, and I'm so excited that you want to get to know me a little bit. I was born Raquan back in 1993, upstate New York. I lived all over Boston, grew up in the foster care system and just bounced around like a basketball. I was very expressive as a young kid. I remember like making up dances for like the counselors and the staff and the programs and being like, I'm gonna put on fashion shows and I'm gonna do talent shows for you all. But stepping into the spotlight didn't really happen until high school. We were gonna be doing Vogue by Madonna, and I was like, oh, I know how to Vogue and I know how to do those dips and tricks. And I remember getting my first wig, walking into rehearsal, and it was this like huge, big curly fro. And I was like, bouncy, bouncy, bouncy. Once I sort of got out of high school, I didn't necessarily think I would ever do drag. It wasn't what I saw myself doing. But I've always wanted to be a musician. I love entertaining. I write my own music. And doing drag sort of made me become the star that I have always wanted to be. When I started my drag, a lot of my performances were dance heavy. I was very like in sneakers and combat boots, wanting to like be like 1 and 2 and 3. I can dance. Like, you can't tell me I can't dance. I think it took an evolution first turn when I started to incorporate spoken word in my numbers. I remember doing spoken word at a Boston club, and it talked about capitalism, and it was really tough, but the crowd was crazy. From there, I sort of continued with using spoken word in my performances. I think once I started working with Sasha Velour, I took another evolution in my drag because I was like, oh, now it's a little more serious. You know, I'm with the winner of Drag Race. I gotta step it up a little. My life outside of drag is very opposite of what I do on stage. When I'm home, I just like to be a homebody. I'm very personal. I don't like people in my business. I adopted my little doggy baby girl, Khadijah, and having Khadijah, I spent a lot of time on my own. I spent a lot of time hiking in nature. I would definitely say my life is a lot better with her. In my past, wearing a prosthetic in my left eye, I've had moments where I've gotten really bad concussions and I've lost vision in my right eye. And so she's actually going to be trained to be a guide vision service dog. Being a disabled performer, one of the things I pay attention to majorly is the visual presentation of the space. I don't have depth perception, so I don't see what everybody else sees. But when you see me perform, you're doing flips in dark spaces, the club floors are wet. I'm often like doing the math of being like, if I do a split and my foot lands here and I can slide 6 feet because that's how tall I am, I'll land right there. I have more bruises because of drag than I do from like sports. And people are always like, why? And I'm like, that's what I do. When I started drag, it was to highlight issues that queer women, specifically trans women of color, go through. I started working with other girls and sort of built a sisterhood with them. And then, unfortunately, there was like a downfall. I got fired from my job. I basically called out a manager that was like trying to police my, I'd say, blackness in my performances. And then I went online and like called things out. Once I sort of did that, majority of the drag community has come back in support. Now, being a trans woman of color, that's sort of my everyday experience. So the sort of message of my drag is still very personal. Boston's definitely changed for the better, and I would say I've had sort of an impact on the upcoming generation of younger queens. We're definitely trying to create the space that we definitely deserve and need, but it took a lot of calling out these people and calling out these actions as a community and being supportive of one another to actually get to those places. Candy Bar is the first place I actually started working regularly throughout the week. It's nice to be back because it's like, this is where everything started for us as a community. Definitely does make me a little nervous sometimes being back here because, you know, I try to give my all to these kind of crowds that saw me in my blood, sweat, and tears at the beginning when I wasn't anything, and I want to give them as much as I've always given them.
Are you all ready for Neon Calypso?
I do drag because I think I am my very, very true self on stage. The purpose of my drag is a lot more meaningful than a pretty look on stage or a click on Instagram. It's like the impact I have as an actual entertainer is what is meaningful to me in my drag.